Hello, and welcome to Meeting in the Sacred, a podcast where each week we invite you into diverse conversations about physical, emotional, and spiritual well being in the pursuit of wholeness. My name is Danielle Chandler. I'm a Christ Path mystic and wholeness coach.
And my name is Teresa Noach. I'm an interspiritual enthusiast and published author with an eclectic Christian background. And no matter where you are in life, if you're curiously seeking, deconstructing, reconstructing, struggling in your faith, or just feeling lost, you are welcome here. This is going to be an excellent episode, because when you're in the pressure cooker of life, you surprise yourself. When you show up for things that you kind of think, do I have it in me today? But you show up, and in church, we used to think that it was just the anointing, right? The anointing would just come upon you and enable you to do something that you couldn't do. And maybe that's true. Maybe there's other ways to describe that. But something comes over you, a lot of times when you're in a place where you think that you just don't have what it takes, or you just don't have whatever. I'm just like, I'm showing up. Yeah, hold on.
I'm just gonna jump right in.
Yeah.
I won't be like, hey, how's it going?
Okay, cool.
I'm just gonna
Ready?
move right into it. Okay.
Yep.
You are listening to episode 10, Knowing Self, Trusting Your Inner Voice. As humans, we have a beautiful invitation to get to know ourselves, our capacities, abilities, thoughts, feelings, emotions, limits, boundaries, and dreams. Knowing self can mean many things to different people. From a wholeness perspective, when we integrate being well into each relationship we have with spirit, soul, and body, we are invited to connect with each part of ourselves. By doing so, we can develop an inner awareness that can support us through all of life's seasons. So often in our adult life, we recognize patterns and behaviors that no longer benefit us or our relationships as they once did. When we participate in relationship with ourselves, we learn about these narratives, suppressed emotions, at what point they came into our lives, and we can discover how to live emotionally sober. When we are emotionally sober, we move into a place within ourselves where we are comfortable being present with all of our feelings without any of them defining or controlling us. We can accept what is and not feel like we have to control things because we feel out of control. In this place, we are given an opportunity to develop conscious self-awareness. This is an inner awareness of our true selves, where we can learn to emotionally regulate and be honest with ourselves from a place of empowerment. Acceptance is often the first step on our freedom journey and establishing an inner core where we can trust our own voice. Many of us grew up in environments that emphasized formulaic thinking, where values, beliefs, and rules, such as you must do this or that, were valued above relationship with our caregivers, or people we looked up to and trusted. As a result, many of us have been disconnected from self due to these life experiences. These relationships made us feel pressure, as though something always needs to be corrected in us. We experience feelings of disapproval or the fear of punishment. This is what a religious mindset manifests: a disconnect and distrust with ourselves and others, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Because of these mindsets and attitudes, many of us were taught that we could be controlled. We also felt powerless in our lives and in relationships, which often manifested in us trying to control others, situations. From this description, it is apparent that one does not have to profess to any specific religion or embrace a specific faith to choose a religious mindset. Fear shows up in everyone's lives differently. A religious mindset typically comes from a narrative where one felt controlled by a caregiver or someone they looked up to who was close to them. This led to a sense of internal disconnect. When we experience this, we live with a great deal of insecurity and a sense of feeling out of control. On the surface, we may seem like we have everything together. Oftentimes, we feel we need things to be done a very specific way, or we will feel threatened. Under mindsets of fear, there is always a story that leads us to a survival skill. What lives in our hearts creates thoughts and feelings that educate us on how we choose to act. From there, we develop habits that form lifestyles. When we connect with our hearts, we are able to listen to these feelings and thoughts that we may have put aside and integrate healing through relationship with self. Practically, this can also look like reparenting ourselves. When we develop an internal awareness of our core values and boundaries, we live an integrous life that reflects who we truly are. When we are true to ourselves, we get to learn ways to cultivate the most authentic life we can. We can take ownership and responsibility for our healing journey. We can experience long-term transformation from the inside out. It is in this place that we can live empowered, find contentment, satisfaction, and what it means to live a meaningful life. Teresa, do you have a story that you would like to share with us that relates to experiencing fear growing up and how or when you realized that and how you chose fear as a resource, which maybe became a lifestyle?
Yeah, you said you brought up feeling threatened and how the feeling threatened can lead us to wanting to control our situation, control others. I wrote down a couple of things that you said because, well, there was a lot. There was a lot. When I was growing up, I remember pretty much always being super friendly, outgoing to what I remember. And by the time I was I guess I was in eighth grade. And I had already been in my fist fight with with a girl in, I think it was seventh grade. And I was the oldest of four siblings. And I was definitely aggressive, um, physically intimidating to my siblings. I had gone through early childhood sexual abuse and was living in a lot of personal dysfunction, for the sake of, honoring my family that's still around. We'll leave a lot of those details out. But my story is also in my book, Unraveled from Trauma to Transformation. The sexual abuse at about 4 or 5 years old, and then again at 9, left me feeling so incredibly powerless, and that opened me up to experiencing a life of bondage to what I identified with as a spirit of rage. And I never knew that it was rage. That's something that unfolded over time that spirit showed me. But I was angry for sure. And I would find any outlet that I could to take out my anger. And it started with that place of being threatened, and not just threatened, but being powerless, being held down, and being um, assaulted, and being handled against my will. And so that just continued to, as you said, habits form lifestyles. So the habit of self-protection, hyper vigilant, you know, becoming hyper vigilant, constantly aware of whether somebody else is a potential threat, whether if somebody looks a certain way or puts out a certain vibe, they can be perceived as a threat. And so there's a lot of subtle, even non-conscious behaviors. For example, all the way into teen years and adulthood, I was putting out my porcupines. People would say to me after getting to know me, you know, you have RBF, right? Resting bitch face. Or that I was intimidating, or that they didn't like me at first. And I didn't realize why, because I thought I was a great friend. I thought I was a really nice person, but apparently I had a really hard exterior. So I had built this up. It was something that built over time, that came from and stemmed from an initial experience that left me feeling powerless. Now my instinct is to build up a way, bless you, is to build up a way to protect myself. But it snowballs into this life of self protection at all costs, which also means that I'm going to identify if you're mad at me before you're actually mad at me, because I have to protect myself. So there's that defensiveness that was built up. But um, I ended up getting into a lot of fights. It became kind of a way of life for me as a teenager. I became, that girl that I wanted other people to be afraid of me. If other people were afraid of me first, then I didn't have to be afraid of them. So I built a persona of tough girl, bad girl. But like your best friend, your roll dog. Like if I was your friend, you knew I was your ride or die. And and so that also worked for me in the sense that it made people want to be my friend, right? Because then they felt like some kind of protection, or they felt like some kind of camaraderie. So I made friends with other people that were like me, and they were fighters, and birds of a feather flock together. And so I hung out with tough people. I hung out with people that were in gangs. Never got initiated into a gang, but we did the stuff. And I'm not even going to incriminate myself, because there were things that, the police never knew about, but I've paid my share in karma, I tell you that. So, but I did also get caught by the police. I was an accessory in a strong arm robbery at 18 years old. And no, I was not an accessory in a strong arm robbery. I was the primary suspect. I was the criminal in a strong arm robbery. And my friend and I decided that we were going to snatch somebody's purse. And, I wouldn't even talk about this years ago, but I know that I'm not that person. And I know that I've continued to pay it forward and heal the child that was on the inside running crazy for her life. And, but previous to that, I was involved in I was the accessory getaway driver. I wasn't quite 18 yet, so I ended up in juvenile detention center. But I was the accessory getaway driver to a robbery at a Subway. And so I hung out with people that were just as scary as I was. And I think back to the person I was then, and I wouldn't want to meet her. I think I'd be scared of her now. I mean, I say that kind of jokingly, because they say something like you can take the hood out of the girl, but you can't take the girl out of the hood. And or I've seen shirts that say like half hood, half holy. So there are days where I'm like, oh my God, I cannot even believe I was just capable of being triggered like that. Oh my God. I can't even believe I just literally got out of my car in the middle of the road. This happened the other day. This woman almost hit our vehicle, and my daughter was driving, and I was in the passenger seat, and it was the most dumb, like she was looking at us. The lady was looking at us as she was turning and about to literally smash the car. My daughter had to hit the brakes. We were like a hair away, and my instinctive reaction was to jump out the car and like, and the lady was like, like she was terrified, and I was like, oh my God, I did not just do that. What was I gonna do? What if she did get out of her car too? Was I gonna fight like right there on the side of the road? God only knows. I mean, had she jumped out too, I would have been in a fight, right? But the lady was terrified, and I felt absolutely horrible. But, I'm still surprised sometimes when I can be triggered to that degree. And, the universe is still giving me opportunities to see where those triggers are, to see where there are still threads or little tiny roots of things, of that anger that was just so woven into my persona because of that initial powerlessness and how strong of an influence that had on my entire life. That by the time I was in my early 20s, I had multiple arrests. I was in fighting everywhere I went all of the time. I'd go into nightclubs all the time, and my friends and I, we would pick fights for fun. And it was a way of life for me until after my first child came along, and I knew that I was pregnant with her, and I knew that the direction that I was going was definitely not going to provide a life of any sort for this baby. And I felt at that point that I had someone to live for, because obviously I didn't love myself enough to want to live for me. So it was by the grace of God that I can say that I was gifted an opportunity to be a mother at that time. And she saved my life because, and I hate to put all that pressure on her. I tell her that all the time. I'm like, no pressure, but you coming into this world at the time that you did was definitely a lifeline from heaven, because I was able to look at this being as worthy of love in a way that I couldn't look at myself, which in the long run taught me a lot too, because I need to be able to see myself as worthy of that love as much as I do a child, because otherwise then you have codependency, like big time. So I've dealt with that as well. But when I found out I was pregnant, I started allowing myself to face those shadows and those demons within me. I knew that the path I was going on wasn't, gonna be good for this child. So I started going to church. I've talked about that in previous episodes. I started going to church. It was what I knew to do. And I'm thankful. I mean, it was the initial phase of my life that helped to bring some normalcy and consistency into my healing journey. By being able to be with other people that were also on a progressive spiritual growth or healing journey. And eventually I got into Christian counseling because I just had still this dysfunction. I now had 2 daughters. They were really little. I was married, and the dysfunction was just in my face more now at that time, because you're in a whole new season of life, different triggers. I had never had 2 little girls up that. Didn't have a husband. All new triggers. And so now all that stuff's being activated in different ways. There were a lot of ways that it was suppressed by just being able to be in a different environment. It wasn't actually dealt with, but some of it was just really suppressed or softened. And so I remember when I was sitting in the counseling room for sexual abuse trauma, and it was peer counseling. And up to this point, we were now at this point taking our masks off. We were at this point, every one of us going around and identifying how what had happened to us became the catalyst for us to start putting on these layers. And so we were now taking off one layer at a time. And it was like literally getting naked. It was terrifying. It was like, oh my God, you mean I'm not really? Because I prided myself on being bold and being, fearless. I prided myself on that. And now I'm getting it all taken away, because that's not really who I am. But that's not really who I am. And that's not really who I am. And all those things were coming off. And I remember sitting there feeling like an empty shell. because of all the stuff that I had created for myself as a means of coping with that sense of being powerless. I had created an entire person. I created multiple kinds of people. I was never diagnosed with like dissociative disorder, but so just putting that in there, um, that isn't my clinical diagnosis, but I can understand and resonate with how those different personalities are created
Mhm.
through the different traumas and the experiences of trying to deal with those traumas. And so we were sitting there, and my counselor said, you know, is it okay that your peers give you some feedback on what they're seeing? And one young lady said, you are just filled with rage. Now, mind you, I thought I kept it pretty cool in there most of the time. I was like, what? Now I'm offended. I was like, what do you mean rage? Like, that's a big word. Maybe I'm a little pissed off, but there's no rage, right? And then like next thing you know, the girl next to her was like, "Yep." And I mean, it was unanimous in the room. And I was like, "Well, okay then. So, what do I do about that?" You know? And I'll tell you, it was so deep that I just now 44 years old, and I've done so 44 years young, I've done so much healing, but the layers were so thick and so heavy that it takes time and consistency. And you had mentioned something about this earlier in your opening. And I think so many people, they get to a place where, I mean, look, I've been doing this inner work of allowing life to show me where there's still room to grow consistently all
Mhm.
of the time until I die. I realize that there is always something, blind spots. There is somewhere that I can still level up. And so the universe will continue to give us those opportunities. God will continue to give us those opportunities to be able to see um, through our triggers. And so I've been working on this, and with this eclipse energy that we just went through, um, the dream world's been super active. And I actually saw that spirit of rage for the first time as an entity in a dream. It has shown up in dreams before as a shadow and like intimidated me, but never showed up as something that was actually a part, like attached to me, like the church would call a demonic oppression or something. Never saw it as an entity that was attached to me until I was in Arizona. And I always knew rage was like this word and it was this thing. And then I was in Arizona and I had a dream and it actually showed itself to me. And what I took from that dream was that there have been so many layers peeled away that it can't hide anymore. And that's the thing. When you peel the layers, you're turning the light on in a part of your soul that the light was dim. And when the light is dim, we live in a perception of separation from love, from source. And that's where these ideas, energies, and entities and things and shadows and entities, like this wasn't just a shadow of mine. This thing wanted to hurt me. And so there's this energy that is resonating at the same frequency. It's an energy or an entity of rage. And when you have the rage in your soul, it can connect to that. It can hold on to that and torment you in your life in ways that you can't control. And so I actually was able to see that, which was super exciting because even though I woke up, all I know to do is to say Jesus, right? I was raised to know that is the most powerful frequency when it comes to any type of dark forces. And I have met people that aren't even Christians and they say the same thing. So I woke up saying Jesus. And when I woke up, I just felt like something had left. And so, I just want to encourage anybody that if you've struggled for a long time with anything, don't be ashamed, first off, because it's not your fault. When something happens in life and you become open and susceptible to these emotions, and then when you live your entire life in a mindset that you didn't mean to create, it was a survival instinct. Your body did what it was supposed to do. But now you're given an opportunity to heal, and to really heal, and to not have anything have control and power over you. And it can take time and patience and a lot of love for yourself and others, for that thing to finally expose itself, in some way. And yeah, so it's been a pretty intense journey. It's been a pretty intense journey, learning to see myself on the deepest level and in the darkest places, being able to really, really see what's in there, and not be afraid of it either, but be so confident in love. And you said on our last episode, in the path, that the path is capable of supporting me, even when I don't know where it's going, even when I don't understand why things are unfolding a certain way. I've learned to trust. And I've learned to trust because when I stepped out for the first time, and for me, going to a church, stepping out, saying, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to trust love. I'm going to trust, for me at the time, it's God. I'm going to trust this. And when I stepped out in faith, or when I stepped out to change my situation one thing at a time, that was an act of faith. And the universe was like, bam, I'm going to meet you there. I'm going to meet you there. Your effort times mine, times 100, right? Effort. Just putting forth a little bit of effort. The universe responds to that, What about you? Tell me a little bit about.
Well, I was going to respond to something that you just said. I think, as we move forward in our life and time goes on, and these wounds from our childhood, where the origin, I guess, was, and the distance that, we move away from that time, it feels like something I've noticed is it feels harder to face or confront those wounds of the past. People sometimes, I've noticed that they almost, I hate to put it this way, but they almost become more dangerous as they get older, when they haven't actually dealt with these wounds, because they really have sunk in so deep to their lifestyles and their habits that, their worlds become so small. Who they are becomes so small. And I can remember, when I was first going into my healing journey, and feeling like almost this shame that started to creep up, where it was like, people wanted to pray for me, and I'm like, I don't need prayer. Like, like, and feeling
Yeah.
like, this is like really weird and like kind of, I don't know, vulnerable, but like I wouldn't have even have known that word yet. It was just like, I don't know, it just felt so unsafe, like these people wanted to spend time with me. Why would they want to spend time with me? And what are they going to find out about me? And how are they going to use that information maybe against me, or try to manipulate me? Because growing up, information in my at my household, providing certain information, did feel like it was being used as almost a weapon against me. When I would disclose truth, it felt like the truth was used against me. So I learned how to lie, and I learned how to cover things up, because lies were believed, but the truth wasn't almost believed. And if it was believed, then it would be used as a weapon. So my upbringing insinuated that we could control people, that we could be externally managed in a way that was really the opposite of experiencing internal empowerment. And what I shared in my intro, of this feeling of experiencing internal oppression because of being disconnected from self due to having an environment where one felt or feels controlled. That was very real to me. That was very much my life. And at 10 years old, I became severely depressed and wanted to die. And I I really started to look towards my peers because I felt like I wasn't getting the connection that I really desired and longed for at home. And it's funny that you said you would ask people if they were mad at you. I would do the same thing, but not in the same way. So for me, I didn't want to be rejected. So if I, reading people's body language, reading people's attitude and their voice tone, like this is all stuff that I was educated by in my environment, but I didn't know until many years later how to recognize that this was something I had learned. And so I was, you know, around my friends and I'd be like, "Are you mad at me?" And I would ask them all the time because I wanted to make sure that we were good. And I would do anything I possibly could to make sure that connection was all right because I didn't want them to be mad at me. I didn't want to feel whatever I guess I thought I would have felt if they would have been because I had experienced those types of feelings at home. And I didn't want to experience that with my friends. So my, my one friend, one time, she's still my best friend to this day. But I remember I asked her so many times if she was mad at me. And she always said no. But then this one time she was like, "Yes, I'm mad at you because you won't stop asking me if I'm mad at you." But anyway, so, through,
Self-fulfilled prophecy right there. That's
yeah,
a self-fulfilled prophecy, right?
it's true. Yeah, it was, that was a learning lesson too, though. It's planted some kind of a seed in my mind for me to want to start to visit, like, why am I asking people this question? I might not have necessarily said that back then, but as I reflect upon it now, it definitely did something to me. Um, but yeah, through the different, um, I guess, life experiences I've shared, something that I reflected on in my healing journey is that I remember physically hiding from my parents when I was little. And I would physically go and find these places that I used to have this like toy box shelving unit. And I would get inside of it and I'd shut the door and I would just hide in there, when I felt like I needed to protect myself from whatever consequence I thought was going to happen. And later in life, I had learned, well, I guess I can, hide emotionally and hide spiritually. I can hide who I am away from the world around me and physically be there and be around people. But it doesn't mean that I have to like show my environment who I really am. And so I would stop like feeling like I had a voice and stop standing up for myself in certain ways because that experience of not wanting to be rejected and wanting to feel accepted started to drive me to do things that I never would have done. So I remember like doing drugs and hooking up with my boyfriends, and it was stuff that I did not want to do. But I was so afraid of feeling that end result and what I associated with a sensation of punishment, which was rejection. And what was I going to do if I had to feel that pain and the suffering associated with that experience? I remember it's funny that you bring up like being a gangster.
Yeah.
I I've sat with this like thought because my husband was like, "Why'd you listen to rap music the way that you did?" Like, I remember in elementary school, I was listening to Bone Thugs and Harmony, and
Bum 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 bum.
my best friend at the time had an older brother, and he would bring home all this music, and she would listen to it, and then she would like share with me the different songs that she would find out about. But there was something about this this sound and these lyrics, and I mean, like I still listen to that sometimes because it takes me to a place inside of myself that I reminisce. But there's still this thing that feels raw and authentic, and I've thought about the world of hip hop and the people from like the inner city, and how this music almost touched a part of my life that made me feel like I was seen, even though I wasn't a thug. I might have tried to act like one. But there was something about it that was so raw to me that it had all this emotion, and it had this artistic expression that wasn't hiding the truth about these people's lives that I gravitated to. And observing the physical representation of how these people present themselves, different hip hop artists and the language that they use, I could see how my friends were also gravitating towards those same things too. And so I remember like slowly integrating different language into my talk, and seeing how my friends started to do that. And it was like there was something inside of these people that we looked up to and what they were generating that we wanted to tap into whatever that was. And I think we thought, hey, by putting on this act or behavior, maybe we too will find a way to touch that. But unfortunately, just like you said, there's further actions and behaviors that can promote that kind of cultural lifestyle. And so, at one point it's like, oh, I'm smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer, to now I'm doing harder stuff. And how did this happen? And I didn't see my life unfolding like this. And I never thought I would do this. I'm hanging out with people that are dangerous. And why am I doing this? Why, And I knew somewhere inside of me that feeling that it was wrong, but I just kept doing it because I was so desperate for a connection. And I really feel like if I would have had stronger connection with my caregivers and in that environment, and it didn't feel so dysfunctional, I would have received the care that I had been looking for, so that I wouldn't have been going out into the world around me to try to almost beg the world to give me the thing that I so desperately felt I wanted and needed. And I remember there was this moment when I decided to change my life. I came to this place where I was just like, man, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is not life giving at all. There's got to be something better than this in this world, and I don't know how to change my life. But I had really reached this place of desperation because I was like, if this is all that life is going to offer me, partying and like living on the edge, it's like it just wasn't satisfying to me. I think like on a physical level, when you're getting intoxicated and using substances, there's an element of, you know, experiencing some kind of natural, I mean, obviously high, right? But that only goes for so long. And I was like, there's got to be something that's better. There's got to be something that's more satisfying. And for me, it was my relationship with God. And that really radically transformed how I got to see life. And when I was living with my mentor, I had these different revelations. So I looked inward and started to sit with myself and to dissect all these little parts of my heart, all these spaces that felt so distorted. And like you were saying, these layers that it's like, oh wow, where'd that come from? And like that was a really strange choice, and gosh, like how did I let that go on for so long? But they were survival skills and tools, and they became lifestyles to me that I realized they were killing me. They weren't actually promoting the life I really wanted deep inside. I really did. I was looking for something deep inside that could satisfy my existence. And um, yeah, I had realized all that stuff was not who I was. And it was just a means of survival and self protection. And when I came to that place, there was almost this like, I had like, for myself, being able to, I guess, dress a certain way was the healthiest form of expression that I could find in my life, probably for my whole life. And so I got really into clothing and makeup, and that's how I showed up. And I had a lot of fun with that. But when I was at my mentors experiencing all this healing and understanding the roots of rejection and trying to be accepted and how that overflowed into every area of my life, I had realized, I think I needed to take out all of my piercings, and I had dreads at the time. And so I decided I should cut them off. And I remember I was taking out my earrings, and something inside of me was like, oh my gosh, if you take these out, you are going to feel so naked. And so I had to like help coach myself to just taking one out at a time. I had like my whole ear pierced, like up and down on both sides. And, it seems so simple and little, like, oh, it's just an ear piercing. But to me, it was a form of identity. I had wrapped my identity around what I had looked like, my music, all that stuff. And I had come to this place where I was like, this isn't who I am.
Mm.
And
That is what I'm saying. It's scary.
yeah, it was frightening. And yet at the same time, I was so excited because I was like, I was angry and I was excited and I was scared and I just knew that there had to be something better, and it was on the other side. It was also in the journey. It was in each moment of me walking this out and confronting all of these things that I had believed as though they were who I was. And yeah, I over the years, I it's probably I did like really intense, intentional healing probably for about 10 years. I really dedicated my life to it and was very intentional with my healing. Um, but as you said, life is the greatest teacher, and these experiences that we have in life with people and opportunities, they are constantly there to be a reminder, I think, what's living and breathing inside of us and how to offer us opportunities to further our healing, because we can have triggers, and those triggers, I believe, are the invitation to step into long-term transformation. And it's not always quick. It's not. It's I don't think it's meant to be. I do believe in miracles, and I do believe in prayer, but I do believe in process, and nature reflects process. And I think that us being human in here is a gift to experience the process every step of the way.
Absolutely. It is a gift, and the
Mm.
process is a gift. And it depending on a person's level of dysfunction, one could determine the severity of the intervention that's necessary for the person's process, right? So we've heard of people use terms like, they're a functioning alcoholic. And then you might have somebody who's, which is a functioning alcoholic is an oxymoron statement anyways. But, but, you may not be able to identify a functioning alcoholic because it appears that they're not in any real harm, or no one around them may not be in any real harm to what others may see, or even what they may see. um, you know i had I've had friends that appear to be functioning alcoholics, and sometimes I would be a little jealous
Mm.
because I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, it kicks my butt, and I still let that snake bite me sometimes, and it'll kick my butt. Like, how
Mm.
do you do that? And you said something earlier about survival skills, and I heard this phrase in my head: survival skills that kill.
Mm.
You were talking about these survival skills that were actually not good for you. But the truth is, when we reach for something to feel better, it is because ultimately our body is seeking homeostasis. That is the built in survival mechanism. It needs balance. And we live in a world where substances are available, and our nature doesn't know the difference between um, nature and chemicals and all this stuff that we've created to mess with our brain chemistry. So, it's no secret that the ancients drank alcohol to wash away their sorrows or their pain. We know even in the Bible, Noah was like, man, that was a long ride. And he got off that boat and got wasted.
Yeah, he did.
You
And
got
then
off
he
that
got
boat.
naked.
He did a whole lot of things, okay? He did some things. And God was like, man, what was I thinking? Like, why did I pick him? Right? No, but the irony in that as well. Um, as if God didn't know he was a secret drunk. I mean, come on, right? No. Um, but survival skills that kill. And depending on the level of dysfunction that we're experiencing in our life, each one of us would need to determine how strong of an action needs to be taken. If somebody is in physical detriment, and here's the thing, somebody could appear to be a functioning alcoholic, and you might say, well, they're not in any physical harm, but you really are, because like what nobody sees on the outside is that your liver might be shutting down slowly, and eventually there's a silent harm that's happening. And some survival skills that kill have been going on for so long in a person's life that they are deeply addicted to these things, or don't know how to live without. And like you said, it can be very dangerous the longer they've gone on, because the deeper and deeper and deeper embedded those coping skills have gone, um, they've now come with a whole series of attachments of things energetically now that are also going to keep that person anchored in that, because now it's no longer even just an addiction, but now those things get nailed deeper and deeper and deeper into this experience. And so, as you said, like believing in miracles, like, are there miracles? Do people just have these divine interventions where all of a sudden they can wake up the next day and they're not using, they're not drinking, they're not whatever that was, that thing, that vice that was killing them? And everybody knows it was killing them. Maybe they've been to jail multiple times, maybe they've OD'd multiple times, whatever, but it's obvious, everybody knows. And then they have this, cry out to God moment, and then they are completely not an addict on the outside. And they usually become street preachers or prison preachers. And I don't say this to mock anybody, but in Christianity, we love those stories, because that miracle of that person changing like that is like that's our testimony of this God that we serve and worship. Like, how can you argue with that, right? And then a lot of times they'll take this person and immediately put them in some type of teaching or testimony or some kind of, this person now like skips an entire process because of this miracle that took place. And so what is so important to remember, whether it's 10 years or 20 years down the road, all of those things that were a part of that person's wiring, it will come out somewhere in the wash.
True.
And they may not be in bondage to substances anymore, but that was a gift. And that wasn't a pass to skip the process. Every one of us are called to go, even the Bible says, from glory to glory, run the race. Apostle Paul himself said, I have a thorn in my side, right? And God leaves it there to keep me humble. He says, I wrestle with my flesh. I mean, even Apostle Paul, who was a miracle like that, blinded, whether you believe the story as a story or real, it doesn't matter. But as the story goes, he was responsible for the murder of many, 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 many people, women, children, anybody that was following Christ. He was responsible for their murder. And then suddenly had this epiphany encounter with God. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, I'm following Christ and I'm not going to murder people anymore. Right. But he didn't become a street preacher overnight. He actually went far, far away from the disciples, which I think this is a really great takeaway for anybody that might be deconstructing Christianity. which is kind of my wheelhouse, by the way. I'm staying in that place because it's really been a passion of mine. So you can connect with me on unraveledtogether.com if you want to go deeper with that. But instead of going to the disciples after his Jesus encounter, and instead of going out and standing on the street corners and telling everybody what just radically happened, he had to go sit with that. He sat, I want to say it was at least 3 years in Egypt. He went as far away from the disciples. It's in the book of Galatians. You can read it. He went as far away from the disciples as possible because he didn't want anyone's influence on his organic experience that he was having with the Spirit of Christ. So he went to Egypt, which is a whole nother thing, because that's a whole nother thing. Like, what did he bring back from Egypt that became a part of the Christian foundation in the church, right? So, so,
But I think
so,
that's key though. The
yep,
element of like going away. Like oftentimes in our healing, we have to remove ourselves from the
yep,
things that were actually causing us pain or killing us, the dysfunction of those dynamics, and there is a difference between isolation and getting away to have alone time, you know.
true. Yeah.
So, but I think that's a really good example of like a
Having
practical
intention.
element.
Right. It's an intentional thing. It's not
Mhm.
it has a purpose to it. There's growth in it. There's a reason for it. Yeah. As opposed to like isolation, which, that comes from shame. And so if we're
Mhm.
walking on a road of liberation, we might experience pockets of shame that we're working through, but getting stuck in shame is going to cause a person to isolate and then begin to, spiral into defeat. Whereas, yes, taking the road to deconstruct or heal or whatever terms you're using for your experience, yeah, changing your environment, getting out of that environment, getting into something that's completely unknown. And even if that means that you have to spend more time in solitude and quiet, I think if we don't choose that, life will definitely give us that. I've seen it over and over and over again. If it is something that we need in our journey and we need to be alone and we need to shut up and listen, then we'll get that chance. And if we don't opt for it on purpose, it will come super inconveniently.
Mhm.
And we could even opt for it intentionally, and it could still be very inconvenient. But I have also experienced in my life the being proactive about something or delaying it. And then the universe is like, yeah, well, you came here to learn this. And so since you didn't want to do it willingly, I'm going to drag you because we're going into this lesson. We're going there, you know?
Surprise.
Surprise. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. It's been really, I think, something that we can talk about even more, learning to know ourselves, learning to know what's not ourself. I think we talked about that really a lot is realizing that going through dark moments in early on in our lives can cause most of us to put on personas and layers that really aren't our true selves. And so as we're going through this healing journey, we want to allow ourselves to be able to take all of those layers off and to sit knowing that we're held in perfect peace by love, um, so that we can begin to really understand who it is that we really are. And there's freedom, liberation, and joy in walking in that truth. And so before I close out, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Um, I believe that we are experts of ourselves, that deep down inside, that we do know who we truly are and the people that we really want to be. And I think that if we really have it in our hearts to want to move in that direction, even though it will be challenging, there will be lots of challenges and there will
That's
be
right.
pain. But I think, like any wound that we can see on our body physically, there's a healing process that has to take place, and there can be goo and pus and all kinds of stuff that visually we see and identify. And just thinking about our hearts as having those kinds of wounds too, and what kind of attention that those wounds need, or how much ointment, how much love, how much care, how many bandages, how much air needs to get to them.
I like that
And
one.
being sensitive to those realities and having compassion, learning to have compassion for the moments that, you know, if you have like a wound on your leg and you really want to walk, but you can't, and you're frustrated and you keep trying to walk, but you can't, and you toil and you fight with that feeling, and then at some point, you're either going to keep dealing with frustration, or you're just going to accept, okay, this is my reality. That's the same experience with our inner world and our inner selves, and how we heal. Sometimes we want to be in places that we aren't yet, but it doesn't mean that we won't be there. But it's trusting the path and the journey, learning to trust ourselves, learning to believe in ourselves, learning to embrace our voice, and be almost like little babies learning how to walk for the first time in all those spaces.
And it
Getting
takes
up and falling
courage.
down. Yes.
That's right. It takes courage. And so, to all of our listeners, we hope that you can be inspired to have the courage that it takes. Courage isn't about not experiencing fear, it is about standing up in the face of fear, doing it afraid. Right. And so, don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on yourself. If you're listening to this podcast, it's because I truly believe that you are being drawn deeper into your journey of liberation and embodying joy and walking in alignment with the blueprint for your life. I mean, gosh, it's yours if you want it, right? So, in the face of fear, and learning to know yourself means recognizing when you're running from something and avoiding something.
Mhm.
And so I'm gonna close out with this one. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it was first used. It's a Latin proverb. It was first used in a play called Forimo in 161 BC.
Wow.
Right? Wow is right. But I heard this one time by a coach that I was with for a year, a financial coach that I was with for a year. And she said, fortune favors the bold. When you step up to the plate afraid and say, I'm going to take an honest look at myself. I'm going to take an honest look at my life. I'm going to allow my triggers to be a mirror to me and not a sword or a reason to defend myself against someone else. I'm going to take someone else's opinion, even though it feels like a judgment, even though it feels like an assault. And I'm going to be a mature person about this. And even though the little kid on the inside of me is afraid and wants to kick and scream and defend itself, I'm going to stand here with courage, right? I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to embody goodness and mercy. And you begin to just continue to step up to each challenge within your life, with that kind of courage and that kind of boldness, taking full responsibility for you. That is how you live in blessing, taking full responsibility for you. And when I say in blessing, sure, that could be manifesting material blessing. But again, sitting with somebody in their final hours of death who lived an upright life and deserved to go in her sleep peacefully will forever change the way I see goodness and mercy. And so I just want to encourage you that if you're experiencing suffering, if you've watched anyone that you love go through suffering, remember that goodness and mercy, that love, that they are not always things that you can see with your physical eyes. These are energetic frequencies that you embody, and you come to a place of knowing that this vessel that you are in is not the end all be all of your existence. And so these frequencies will stay with you for eternity. And even the Bible says that when we pass from these vessels into the infinite experience, whatever that may be at that point, whatever your belief system is that you're with at this time, whether you think you're going to get another vessel and come back and do some more growing, or whether you think you're going to get a light body and you're going to live in heavenly realms, whatever that is, the frequencies of the divine will continue on. And anything of ego, anything of the flesh will be burnt up like fire. And so we have an opportunity in this life to walk through that fire, to develop these qualities and these attributes and these gems, to gather up these gems through the fire of this life, so that we have these things to take with us into these eternal realms. There's nothing else to take with us other than the gold, other than the diamonds, other than the rubies, other than the gems. There's nothing else to take with us. Everything else will burn away. And so we can either rinse and repeat and create an internal suffering for ourselves, or we can stand up and be bold, because fortune follows the bold. That's all I'm going to say for today. You can actually reach Danielle and I on Instagram, Meeting in the Sacred. We're also online, Meeting in the Sacred. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to interact with you. We'd love to get some feedback on any of our podcasts that you've listened to. And you can also, as I said before, you can find any of my music, my book, or my deconstructing community currently at unraveledtogether.com, or go to Facebook and look me up. I think I still have room for friends on there, so I screen. But Danielle, where can they find you?
You can connect with me on Instagram at You Are Fully Alive.
Bam, simple as that. All right, everybody. Well, we thank you so much for listening today to episode 10, Knowing Self, Trusting Your Inner Voice. And we encourage you to continue to lean in to that voice of divine love and continue to follow the light that is present within your heart and within your heart space. Namaste.